Okay, good morning. It's 8 o'clock, and we're at the intersection between faith, community, and civic leadership, as well as being civically engaged. So we always take just a few minutes for announcements. So that gets as many people into this room as possible. Billy, did you want to announce the new portal?
I
We've
would
looked
like
at the
to.
good.
Yesterday, Sacred, along with the IDD champions, announced a new portal that is now available. We call it the IDD and Disability Portal. It shows up on our main page. We launched it yesterday. We had 110 people in room. We had the opening panel with Rebecca Helterbrand and a number of others there to represent the community of people who work on behalf of folks that deal with IDD. And we use them to create the content, they're being experts in this area, and put together with a lot of thank you to Autocelis, who put the many of the programs in here, so that we can help folks, the caregivers, the individuals who are in that space, and others can find relief. We've also got a set of curated articles, about 20 of them so far. So if you don't know where to start, we've got an area we can point you to begin to learn what you need to know about developmental disability, and where to go get help. So I'll put the link in the chat. Take a look.
And thanks to sacred.org, they empower these gatherings and have been for about 3 years now. And so thanks to them for not just the new portals, but all the resources that we can dive into through that space as a community. Any other announcements of things coming up? I do know that the Interfaith Thanksgiving service is next Tuesday evening, as it always is annually, at the San Fernando Cathedral, 7 p.m. And on Tuesday evenings, there's free parking downtown, so that works well. And that's one reason they have it on Tuesday evenings. The closest parking garage to that, which is just barely a half a block away, is at the city tower, where the city administration offices are now. So I invite you all to attend that. As you all know, the Thanksgiving is a national holiday, so it doesn't come from one faith tradition. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for many faith traditions to come together in gratitude for who we are in this world, and, that San Antonio nature that we are as well. Let's see, what other announcements? There's a major
I
announcement.
have one.
Great.
Just a reminder that the Light the World giving machines are up and running at the Pearl, and they will be there for about 3 weeks. So I encourage everybody to go down and check them out, and hopefully make a contribution to some worthy charity that you support.
So in case you're not familiar with those, it's really something to see, but there are these vending machines where you can give donations to local nonprofits. Who are the nonprofits? Do you know? Can you remember, Joe?
Well, just some of the big ones, like the San Antonio Food Bank is a big one. Let's see, Haven for Hope is a big one. The Rotary, San Antonio Rotary International is a big one. There are a couple of other local charities. There are also some large international charities that reach around the world too.
Thanks, Joe. It's really something. And I find it really exciting to take young people along and children, because it looks different. It looks like a vending machine, but it's also an opportunity to have those kind of conversations in a really fun space as well.
Right.
Any other announcements at 8:04?
I have one, Ann. I just mine's more a save the date for the blessing of the peacemakers. So all of us here on the screen, it's also where we announce the 2026 Peace Laureates. And I'm happy to say all of the ones that we have discerned and selected have accepted. So that is really exciting. So just to save the date for January 25th, blessing of the peacemakers. Thanks.
And you wouldn't, like be willing to share who those laureates are yet, or should we
Oh,
keep that under wraps?
whatever you want, Ann. You want me
Who
to
wants
share?
to know?
Should we
Who wants to know?
share? Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, I
Antonio,
saw
wait.
Antonia and
Okay.
Rich. That's all I needed. So the 2026 Peace Laureates are Show Nekpodia from Dream Week. So we're really excited to honor Show. And then Nelson Wolf, Nurturing Hope, an initiative that was grown here in San Antonio with and for youth. And then lastly, Corazon Ministries. So these are really people who have a steadfast commitment to peace via compassion, using compassion as the roadmap to get to peace. And they've done this for a really long time and have had big impact in our community. So we are excited to honor them and hope to see you there also, because this is about and for you. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I don't know if you said 3 to 5, but you can mark that in your calendar too. So it's usually, we think it's the closing event to Dream Week. So, because it is like one of the last things. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with even an announcement of what we're doing now at the intersection, which formed right at the beginning of COVID, because we didn't know much about COVID. And so the mayor then and I started to convene this so we could all learn together and lead together. And then that grew into other questions, especially when there was a rise in domestic violence during COVID. People had questions then about that. And it was kind of like one conversation led to another conversation. So we've been talking for these 5 years about those really important leadership possibilities and opportunities to co-labor together. We just now are rebooting and kind of rebuilding and looking at how we do the intersection in a different way. And we're starting today. This is our first time to go in that direction. We're looking at going, in one sense, more upstream, right? We've always been talking, and we will continue to do that, about current concerns in the community. But let's go deeper. What about our today, future today leadership? Where is this moving? And how can we reinforce it? We have recently, in at least the last year, seen a real rise in organizations, nonprofits, congregations who are really working at engaging younger leadership, nurturing that, but also thinking creatively out of the box. And what does that take? And so we're going to be doing that kind of exploration about younger leadership and engagement in San Antonio. We're going to be doing that every Thursday, except next Thursday. That's the big announcement. We're not meeting on Thanksgiving. But we're going to be doing that between now and January 15th. And on January 15th, there will be an in-person community gathering at Region 20 offices, which is where all of our, school districts and everything come together. So we're going to be looking at education and compassion and how do we build community within that. I think that's going to be like 9 to 1. So that's another announcement. You might want to go ahead and note that on your calendar, January 15th, 9 to 1 in-person community conversation where this will all culminate. So this morning, to start that off, we're going to be asking some younger leaders in our community what the real questions are. I have mentioned to them and inviting them that over these last couple decades in meetings that I go to, where there's this desire to connect with younger people, the question is always, how do we get younger people more involved? Which, good question, but maybe it's not the questions we need to be looking at. And so Antonio is here from Oblate School of Theology, where he helps to organize community education and outreach. We have, I don't know if Jordan's here yet, but I've texted her, Sam, you might kind of put a ping there if she's not here. Meg is here. She's the executive director of the San Antonio Peace Center, and also with Alamo Colleges, specifically Northwest Vista College, and so where she directs the Peace Center. Rich is with us from Phenomenon 210, and which that in itself, one of these Thursdays will be around things like what Rich is leading, with a little, more imagination and innovation. What does that exactly mean? So I do know that Rich is here. So welcome all. And I'm just gonna open it up to the 3 or 4 of you. Let's see, can we take me off the screen maybe so we can at least get Rich in here? Here, I'm gonna do this. There we go. Rich, you're with us, right? I know I saw you. There you are.
Yes.
So I'm just going to ask all of you, what are the real questions with our younger leadership in San Antonio in terms of engagement? What are younger leaders grappling with? And you can just start having that conversation. I want to hear the questions. I'm writing them down.
Well,
Please,
Go,
Rich.
Rich.
Go, Rich.
so good morning, everyone. So when Anne posed this opportunity, I guess I started thinking about just the my personal experience with it. There are, I've sat on boards for various organizations from Alamo Arts Ballet Theater to the Inspiration Center, different organizations where at the time I was one of the youngest people at the table. And this has been a question that's been going on for, since I can remember. Um, and with that being said, I'm not really judgmental about what I've heard over the years. I'll just report what I've heard, which is, there were situations where the sentiment was, well, students, these kids can afford to pay, whatever minimal fee we have. We want them to dress the way we want them to dress. We want them to show up and present themselves the way we want them to present themselves. And that seems to be a consistent theme. And there have been times when I've picked up students who were just, they were in truancy issues because they were ashamed for the bus to pick them up and for other people to know where they live. So they're dealing with some issues that would take them out of possibly being able to do some of the minimal requirements that some of our organizations maybe have blind spots to seeing. With that being said, I was hoping to be able to spend a minute or two sharing what the students have themselves said. I posed this to some of our phenomenal compassionistas, some of our students, leaders within Phenomenon, and they sent a response. I'd rather take my time, if that's okay, to share one of their responses, if that's all right with everyone.
Be great.
Okay.
So you want to share screen?
Yes.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. There you go.
Share sound. Okay. Oh,
And while Rich is working on that, I don't know if Meg or Antonio want to kind of add while we're. So I heard some of the barriers are things like transportation. I mean, some real just logistics that keep young people from being more engaged. Did I hear that correctly?
that's correct. And I'll just in case it takes me a while to get the sound up, I can drop it in the chat if it's if it's a problem, so as not to
No,
hold up the conversation.
just keep working on it. We want to
I'll read
hear
the
it.
question. I'll read the question, and that way you'll have that at least. If young people are expected to show compassion and civic engagement, how do we ensure they actually receive compassion, support, and grace from the adults and systems around them, especially when many of them are just trying to survive long enough to become the leaders we hope for?
Great question. Here we go.
Megan, Antonio, I apologize
Sure.
for the delay. If
No,
y'all
no,
want
no. Well, you're doing that. I think that's a beautiful question, Rich. And I was going to say that a lot of our conversations center on questions, right? This inquiry, this educational inquiry on these themes, like what does it mean to be compassionate? So what I was just going to add was thinking, and you said something about, looking to the future. And in peace work, in this peace related field, we talk about the 200-year present, which is a term coined. I mean, it's an indigenous practice and a term refined by a peacemaker named Elise Boulding. And what she talks about is when we are engaged in any of the work that is transformative, our responsibility is to think of the youngest person it touches and the oldest person it touches. So this arc of engagement. And so some of the questions that come through that arc of engagement for our students, we're at a community college. Our desire is to democratize education. So that means making it accessible for all of our San Antonians to engage. And so when we are looking at that arc, when we're thinking about our mission that centers students, the question for them, and that I've heard when we work with students, is where do I belong in a community that seems to have already set their priorities for us? So that we are the receivers and not the generators of the issues that we see. So that's we watched the Edgewood walkout happened in 1968, right? And we had a discussion about it. And someone said, well, the issues then are the issues now. And why don't I get space to talk about how that impacts me now? Why am I watching a documentary about students in 1968? So my response was for inspiration, for to see the compassion and the action that they took. And the student said to me, and Meg, I also have my own ideas. And so then it was a discussion about, well, what are those ideas? What does a fair and just educational system look like for you? So I will stop there and ask my friend Antonio or Rich to hop in.
Mick, could you write those two questions
Sure.
into chat?
Will
Because
do.
those are valuable questions. Rich, were you able to get the video going?
let me, I can try. If Antonio, if you're ready to go, I can play it afterwards or.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. First, I want to give deference to the incredible contributions of Rich and Mig. They have a lot more daily life contact with young people in their professional work. I can tell you that today is my 31st birthday. So whatever that has to say about being a young person in this context, that's what I'll speak from, right? And it's an incredible joy to be among such friends, right? I'm really encouraged to speak candidly by the reality that I know a lot of the folks on the screen and those who I don't know, I can already call friends. So while there are a lot of like concrete questions to ask about youth organizing, and this is organized around faith, community, and civic leadership, I would hope that in my comments, some kind of other questions arise that I think are equally as important. I see young people approach older people, and they seem to have in their left hands a kind of fierce moral conviction about the better world that's possible. And in their right hands, they have a kind of severe disenchantment with the world that they see around them. And I see them going to older folks in these community building spaces and asking them kind of, what do I do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? You came before me. You contributed to creating this world. What am I supposed to do with this? And I think one of the most compelling responses that they can receive from folks more experienced in this work is, that's up to you, but I will hold this with you. I'm not going to give you, as Mig was saying, the agenda that you're supposed to take this energy and invest it into. I'm here for your agenda, but I will help you and hold this tension with you in birthing forth this new world. The other question, I don't know if that's a question. I think the question is like, what am I supposed to do with this, right?
And how am I supposed to do it, right?
Right.
When am I
Yeah.
how am I supposed to do it?
Right. But the other question, um, again, turning 31 today, and I'm a male in this world. I'm a guy. And this might resonate with some folks, but I'm 31 years old, and I see myself competing professionally, culturally, commercially with folks who are in their 50s and in their 60s, meaning that we want to drive the same cars, we want to see the same movies, we want to get the same jobs. And it leads me to ask myself, what good is there in getting old? If I can expect at 50 and 60 to want the same things that I want at 30 or 28, or like the young men that I taught at Central Catholic at 15 and 16, competing for the same objectives, what difference is there in being this age versus that age? And that's a disquieting question to me, because I want to see, and I think that I've been fortunate enough to see, and too many people are not fortunate enough to see, the fruits of wisdom and experience and time in mellowing people out and no longer living, being torn apart by this tension, but in fact, living in the fruit of what that tension has led them to build their life towards. So, some brief examples before I'll stop talking. Donna and Peggy's marriage, and in the little bit that I've seen of it, is so joy-filled and love-filled that I pray for that kind of relationship in my life. Right? I've seen Peter in various public spaces offering his time and his presence and his support to building a better world. And that inspires me to say, I might not engage in it in the same way, but I will still be present for that future that young folks are bringing forward. And I think you and I had this conversation earlier this week, and you raised that question at the very beginning of this conversation. How do young people get more involved? The example that you offered me in that question that hasn't been mentioned here is that you invited them. You invited them. Very simply, you said, let me think of a young person at this next event where they're not here. I'm going to bring one. Right? These are the kinds of um, elder modeling that I think young people are longing for and desperate for and thirsty for. And navigating those questions together is indeed our task. But I think Meg and Rich have so beautifully offered some kind of concrete questions that I think are worth reflecting on personally.
Mm-hmm. And again, Antonio, if you could put those into chat in your succinct way, those will help carry us forward. One of the things that we're going to be doing in these future Thursdays, and I don't know if Greg is still with us, but what we're going to be looking at models that are, being innovative. And he's from Springfield, Missouri, and they've started something that's both started with our elders, but now is being asked for in high school and middle schools, but where even young people are becoming consultants to community organizing and nonprofits. So there's a partnering within the educational system and young people and what's happening in the world, not just interns, but how does that voice speak to what's happening? I've also encountered online just yesterday an organization called Run for Something. I love the name of it. And look, I don't know if Meg or Antonio or Rich knows about it, but it's just encouraging younger people to run for something.
Yeah.
For city council or, run for something. And we also have an excellent model locally that started locally and is across the state, but Move Texas, MOVE, that still continues to get young people to vote. But because once you get involved in the voting process, you start to know a bunch of stuff about other things that become really important to you. So we'll be looking at some of those, a little bit different tweak about engagement that is working. People also ask me, what age are you talking about? That's always a question around the word youth. And it can mean different things with different efforts. But I've heard a really good, and Antonio just reminded me of it, but a really good age bracket, 13 to 31. So, if you remember the 1331, anywhere in there, and some before and some after, And some of us still think we're 17, even though we're not. But, if young, and the one thing that Antonio is referring to was I was trying to get younger leadership on the board for the International Charter for Compassion. And I just challenged, because I was the youngest one, and I'm not that young. So I challenged everybody on the board that the next board meeting, they would each bring a person that was at least half their age and didn't look like this.
Mm-hmm.
The next board meeting. And now over half of that board is under the age of 35.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are in their 20s. And it has changed everything that they're doing. Everything. So, Meg?
No, I was just going to say, and I think that's a very important point, the advocacy of young people, that it's more than just a representation of a young person. If we're going to ask young people to run, I would love to see Antonio run. I would love to see Rich run. And then how do we support them with the comments or the dialogue not being, well, they're inexperienced or they're they don't have enough experience. It's how do I help them have that experience? And the other thing I was just going to mention is mentoring. We've traditionally, so when we even talk about systems, how systems have been created to keep young people out. So in mentoring, it's usually MIG is mentoring the college student. And I'm wondering how we flip that, how it is an activity, it is something that is life-giving and reciprocal, but that it's not the person who's 70 mentoring the person who is 17. It's that it is, we don't even call it that. It's just a way to be together to exchange the wisdom of our lived experiences.
So, Rich, now would be a great time to see that video. We're at 8:27. And so for those who need to go on and be on with their lives this morning, feel free to leave. I'm hoping that our conversation starters are able to stay maybe another 15 minutes because we'll want to keep having conversation. I want to remind everybody that these are recorded and then sacred.org edits them down and they're posted online. So you can take these to team meetings, to congregation, organizational meetings, whatever that is, and share these great insights. I can see that Rich has his
Yeah, in the chat box, young women are invited to present at the UN. We start working on it. See my thing in the chat box.
Yay. Thank you, Martha Ann. Go, Rich.
Are y'all able to hear her?
I don't hear anything yet, Rich.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Let me just read it to you. Fortunately, if your plan B, Google has this little translate option. So can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So her name's Amari Pollard. She's a St. Mary's. She's a St. Mary's student, and she's getting ready to go into law, pretty much for the reasons that she explains here. She says, when I hear the word compassion, I think about somebody who's willing to go out of their way to help others, even when they're struggling. I think a lot of the older generations believe that they have had it harder, which in some cases they have had, but I think they fail to see that this current generation is also struggling with their own issues and obstacles, especially if we're used to having certain policies in place that are able to protect us, are certain luxuries that we've had previously growing up and they've been taken away from us. As we enter into this adulthood, it can be hard for us to adjust. It's like being a baby bear from the wild and throwing it into the zoo. It's a drastic change. Like we're just not used to that. And it could be hard to adjust if we have to readjust all over again. But right now, we don't have that luxury because it's happening so fast. But we have to keep up with it. And I think compassion is being empathetic, being understanding, and being able to help and not judge. Like, I don't believe that they should say, like, we had it harder for this reason. Y'all are just soft. I think that is the wrong way to put it. And I think that's like an ongoing traumatic cycle, but they probably endured from the previous generation telling them that they had it harder and that their problems are insignificant. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. And I think it's hard for people to practice compassion because they're not giving it. So they're not giving grace and they're not giving grace. So how can we, so how can the, so how can the older generation expect us to be empathetic towards them or towards each other when they're not showing empathy like that? That's kind of a double standard. She has another one. I'll drop the transcript from that other response in the chat as well. But yeah, I just wanted to give the students the opportunity to speak for themselves on this.
And so we're hearing a lot of that, right? Bringing the voice in, speak for selves, support that, and then not just support, but even expand it somehow. Yeah.
I want to highlight that I think the reason, or one of the reasons that Rich can elicit that kind of candid and honest question from a young person is because the relationship that he cultivates, that I think she's speaking to, is one that is personal rather than performative, right? Because I do just want to put an asterisk that I think young folks can tell when they're being invited into a space for the sake of having a young person, rather than saying, we recognize that you have a particular experience that's distinct from ourselves. And that is, one person is not interchangeable with another person, regardless of their age. And preserving that as the framing through which we engage that relationship is where you're going to have that kind of authentic reflection of what's really going on, rather than somebody coming in and saying what they're supposed to say. So I applaud Rich especially for making that intentional incorporation of a person's candid thoughts. Thank you, Rich.
Do we have any questions from folks who are attending this morning? Any thoughts? I have a lot of gratitude.
As far as thoughts, it's just right down the alley about what I've been thinking about for the last few years, giving the youth a voice. And then I was reinforced by when we had our No Mas National Organization for Men Against Sexism 50th conference here in San Antonio in August, and they brought an organization from can't remember the name of the city, but from New York City, called SADA, which is the Students Activists Ending Dating Abuse. And to hear these young people speak and having a voice to share with people what's going on in their lives, what's going on in their homes, what's going on in their relationships in middle school and high school. Because when the young man is seeing the coarser behaviors of their father and how their mother's being treated and how she's being spoken to and how she's being mishandled, then they themselves, when they start getting into their own engagements with, girlfriends and, significant others, then their behavior mirrors that of their fathers. And the thing is that, we've had this problem here for probably 40 years because my good and dear friend, Patricia Castillo, has been talking about this for that long. And you see how then it seeps. And I know somebody who does a lot of domestic violence facilitating for the San Antonio Fatherhood Campaign and the American Indians of Texas. And I'm very deep in my conversations with people. I mean, and to me, nothing's taboo. I dive into anything and everything to get into the heart and to the spirit of people. When I can get in there and make somebody vulnerable enough to be truthful, then you start getting the work. Then men can start truly taking the acknowledgement and the ownership of what they do. Because everybody's always pointing fingers. Well, she wouldn't have said this, and she wouldn't have done that. And if he would, it's always pointing fingers at somebody. Just like the Bertrand was saying earlier. Oh, well, we had it where my mom. I mean, I'm 62, right? And my dad would say, "Man, we have to walk through the snow." I said, "Dad, you live in Texas. Ain't no snow in Texas, But it's just those things that we tell our kids just to say, "Oh, you got it so bad." But yes, there's no doubt in my mind that there has to be a voice for the youth of all of San Antonio. And these issues that are affecting all these families in San Antonio, domestic violence, sexual abuse, human trafficking, all these things need to be discussed in schools, at middle school, in high school, in colleges. These things are everybody's problems. They're not just the problems of those that are actually, directly affected by it. It affects everybody.
That's why our gathering in January is going to focus on education as well, like what the system, how can we do that? Randy, your hand is up.
Thank you.
You're muted. There you
Okay,
go.
there we go. It's made me think of a couple of things with relationship to the church that I go to, and I'm on the session, and that those meetings are rigid. They come with an agenda, and we talk about the things that are set up to talk about. And there is not a space. It's made me think that we ought to have a space in that meeting for an open forum or an open question of whatever comes up. Maybe they're afraid of meetings going over time, but I think to actively incorporate that into a meeting would be a good idea. And the second thing is, that's a Presbyterian church. I started out in a Baptist church, and one thing that they did at the end of each service was to make an invitation. We don't do that in our church. We don't invite people. We don't say, we want you to be a part of us. I think that's a mistake, because I know that I've heard from people, not just in the church field, but also in business. Well, why didn't you do this? Why? And the answer is, nobody ever asked me. Nobody ever asked me to join. Nobody ever asked me to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. Here's another thing that I hear over and over as a member of an older group. We've tried that before, from people in our group that say, we've tried that before. And a lot of times it's like, yeah, 20 years ago you tried it, or 30 years ago you tried it and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean it can't work now. It's just being stuck in old thinking. Mm-hmm. That's all.
But those are good reminders. Greg from Springfield, Missouri has his hand up.
If I could just offer real quick an outsider's perspective. First of all, thank you for letting me listen in. Communities can change. About 20 years ago, and for about 30 years, we've been going on community leadership visits, and we take about 70 community leaders, and we go on the road and we go spend 2.5 days at another community. About 20 years ago, we were in Knoxville, I believe it was, and there was a panel of their young professionals, and they looked into the audience at us and said, "Where are your young people?" And they were right. We didn't have hardly anybody under the age of 40 that was a community leader on that visit. Now, if you go on the community leadership visit and you look at who's there, about a third of the entire group is probably age 35 and under. And so we had to be very intentional about it, but we also needed that wake-up call, because when they said, "Where are your young leaders?" they were absolutely right. We didn't have a seat at the table. And when I led the community strategic planning, I reserved one seat on every planning committee for only one group, and it was young professionals. I wanted young people at the seat of every committee so they had at least one reserved seat. And that was kind of controversial, but it made sure we had young voices in that process.
Mm-hmm. And that comes from a former city manager in Springfield, as well as CEO of United Ways. So we're going to hear from Greg in 2 weeks. See, you're excited, right? I am. Beverly, you have your hand up. And if you're talking, you're muted.
You all, I'm so sorry. My camera's not working, so I'm not able to see with respect to these young people. This is really kind of to, everyone, thank you for the education and the openness, but also too, for all of us on the phone, the way, as with most things, as Sam talked about earlier, we have to talk about changing behavior. And I just want to be able to say that maybe as we move forward and we do things, in order to change communities and culture, I'm an old community organizer and been that all my life. To change policies and practices and behavior, sometimes you have to set it in stone. And I say this because one of the greatest fights of my life was with the Drug-Free Communities Act that was signed into law. And with this, these were coalitions that were established around the country to prevent substance use. But in the law, in order for an organization to get this grant, you must have not only a youth serving organization, but you must have a youth on your board, literally on your director. I mean, on your actual coalition board, and you can't be funded if you don't. And so this was one of the. I mean, oh my goodness, we went back and forth with Congress and people around the country, and I said, no, nothing for us without us, nothing. I said all of these things. If we're trying to prevent young people from using, from making mistakes. That we know all of the stories. And I'm so pleased to say that has now been in place now for 40 years. And we have seen so many of these young people grow up, and they are now, they see things differently because of their experiences. They are elected officials. They are leading in their schools. They are doing this. And I say this because we sometimes call it lip service, but lip service is just what it is. It's something we say. The young man who was on, there's a commercial, there's an ad done by the ad council. It's called The Long Way Home. And Sam Johnson is this little boy who's running home. And some of you, it was one of the most powerful ads, but he literally pulled all youth together. That was a total youth directed ad. And it has remained the most popular ad that the ad council has ever had. Wow. And so you all say is legitimized, but I would ask us and ask you all to think about how do we put this into the groundwork, because talking about it is wonderful. Doing something about it is another. And my very good friend is our Councilman Jalen McKee Rodriguez, and he will tell you, at his age, he gets so much flack about that. I am an avid supporter of Jalen. People know all the time that I am barely going to be. I mean, I will stand up and tell somebody be quiet if I see them picking on him, because they do it because he's young, and he's a councilman. And so I thank you all for this, but I think we need to. I would offer. I don't want to preach, so I would just hope that we could think a level deeper as to how do we put things in stone. It's through policies and practices. We have to change that force people to have to change behavior. It's a shame that we have to force ourselves to do this. I mean, we would think it's natural, but you guys, anything that has to do with control and power, human nature is to try to shorten. So as working with you all, thank you so much for your time. And I just ask that maybe, Anne, if we could have space to really think about how do we change the policies and practices? How do we make sure that we have a young person, not just on one council or commission of the city and the county, but that we have 4 and 5, that they, we don't do one token, we do lots of, young people on all of our,
board should reflect our demographics,
Right.
like age. Right, as well.
So, yeah, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on too long, but
that's okay.
Being here, and it's it's not a sprint, it's a long distance journey, but with you guys, we can get there. But we need to change the groundwater.
Yep, and that's why we're doing this kind of series intentionally. I think that's an important word in all of this. We're at 8:44, and we will be signing out at 8:45 to respect everyone's day. But that's why we're doing this series, to be more intentional and invitational, and then moving towards action, seeing where there is action already. Well, I'm hoping that Meg and Antonio and Rich continue to come to At the Intersection. I invite all of us to again think of someone that's at least half of our age and who doesn't look like this, and invite them to At the Intersection and into this community conversation. This isn't just a time of information and learning together. This is a way to create community and organize as well. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm just going to leave it there. But I'm also willing to just hand over At the Intersection to somebody who's half my age and doesn't look like me. And, you know, we've spent 5 years building this, and that's quite a gift. So if anybody feels inspired in that direction, just let me know. And I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to let's move this all forward. We're smarter than this, right? We know what we need to do. We just need to be more intentional.
Yes.
And invite people. Those two things will be huge. They can change everything. So I want to thank you all for coming. It's 8:46. We will not be meeting next Thursday. We meet almost everyone, but not next Thursday because it's Thanksgiving. We will be meeting in 2 weeks, and we'll be hearing from Greg and Cora, who's also from Springfield, Missouri, to help us think a little bit out of the box, and something that happened while they were using their wisdom with some of us older folks, and it has transformed into something else. It's very exciting. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Meg, Antonio, Rich, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I hope to see you here in 2 weeks. You might want to check in on Jordan. I hope she's okay.
Yeah, I was checking on her. She never got back to me. She must be in a meeting, the ED or something.
Thank you all. See you in 2 weeks. Have great weekends. And a great
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving. Take care.
God bless.